how money works. We're
Oof.
gonna go through. Go ahead. I just turned the recording start. Yeah, welcome to the Game of Money. I'm Nathan with the Cowart team, and we're gonna get started with a little presentation on how money works and what to do with yours, and answer any questions as we go along. I think everyone that joins the presentation will be on mute to start. So just unmute yourself if you do have a question during the question times, or you can put them in the chat, and Isabel will bring those up in the breaks. All right, so let's get started. Welcome to the game of money. So, money is kind of just a big game for a lot of people. You're moving pieces around and trying to win at it. So, we want to give you some tips on how you can do that. We are gonna just give a quick overview. We're gonna try to end this right on time at 6:45. So I'm gonna go kind of quickly through the slides, but if you have any questions, please keep them in mind, and we'll take some breaks where we can answer those. Just here to learn the basics and keep it simple. We're not going to go super in depth on anything, but just kind of give you a broad overview of the game of money. So, talk a little bit about budgeting, investing, saving, how do credit scores work, what sorts of debts are good and what sorts of debts are bad, how do you retire, what do you do to save for retirement, and then some other things like insurance and taxes and just some general words and definitions, stuff like that. So, what do you need to play this game? Most important thing is really just a plan, some discipline, some patience, some good advice, which you're here for right now, and a strategy. We use time blocking a lot as a tool, which is just setting a time and sticking to it. And the KISS principle, KISS, which stands for keep it simple, stupid. So just start easy, don't make it complicated, stick to what works. And as you get better at the basics, you can move on to more advanced concepts. Why do we play the game of money? Well, everyone has their own reasons. Freedom is a big one, living the life that you want, being flexible with your family, your work, leaving something to your loved ones, your kids, or your family members, buying the things that you want in life, the ability to have a different future, whether that's retirement or a change of career or maybe a different future for your loved ones, buying a house, accomplishing some big goal. And yeah, just creating that vision and that plan is really what this is all about. We promise that making the plan, doing the hard work up front, and doing it as early as possible is worth it. And it's really the only way to win at the game. So, where do you start? We think number one, best thing you can do is to have a budget. If you don't have a budget, you should. We have some great free resources on budgeting. We also do another webinar called Budget Like a Boss. We'd love to see you there. And we like to say you need to tell your money where to go, or else you'll be wondering where it went. It doesn't have to be super complicated. You don't have to keep track of every single penny, but having a budget and keeping an eye on it about twice a month is crucial and a great first step no matter where you are on the wealth building ladder. So, where should your money go? Well, you can get super detailed on your budget, but we like to start with the basics, keeping it simple. We use the 50/30/20 rule. 50/30/20 is just putting half your money or 50% towards the things you have to buy, rent or mortgage, gas, car, clothes, food, the things you can't do without. 30% you can put towards your wants, meaning, maybe nicer clothes, nicer food, I don't know, hobbies, sports, whatever it is that you like to do, the things that you want in life, but don't spend all of your money on that. And then the 20% that's left, we recommend putting towards your savings or other goals, whether that's paying off debt or investing for the future. And that's it. 50/30/20 is a great place to start and a great way to start your budget. So just for instance, here are some rough numbers. If you live in a household where you're bringing in about 100,000 per year, this is kind of what that 50/30/20 breaks down to. And if this seems unreasonable, like there's no way I can pay my bills $2,900 or whatever that number is for you, that's okay. It's just a starting point. You can go with the 60/30/10 if you need to, or it could be just 60/40 if that's where you're at right now. But working towards that breakdown and just having a plan to get there is going to help you a lot. All right. So let's say we've gotten past step one, we've got the 20% of our take home we're putting into savings. Well, what do we do with those savings? Step one, we think, is an emergency fund. A lot of people don't have this. In fact, statistics say about 70% of Americans don't have money in the bank to cover a $1,000 emergency, which is really kind of sad. I mean, it's hard to imagine like anything could happen that costs $1,000. And if you're one of the 70% of Americans, like that could really set you back. And most people end up going with credit cards or something else to cover those gaps. But we think if you're saving, go ahead and start with an emergency fund. $1,000 is all it takes. That's most of your basic car broke down, something like that. Once you've got that set up, move on to what we call your survival number, which is essentially what are all of your expenses you have to pay in a month. If you were to cut everything down and just kind of eat at home and make it as simple as possible, what is that number? And everyone's is going to be different because everyone has different expenses. But you figure that out and then create a reserve savings account with 1 month of that survival number in there. Next, we think if you've got a workplace that offers a 401k match, that's a fantastic way to increase your savings really quickly. The 401k match is where you put some money in and then your work offers to match that up to a certain percentage. So it's like free extra money. It also happens before taxes, which is awesome. And that's money that's just going to be tucked away for your retirement later. All right. After that, you're going to want to start saving up to about 3 months of your survival number. That way, if a major life event happens, you get injured and you're out of work for a little bit, or you're between jobs, changing jobs, something like that, you're covered. You've got a little peace of mind. Once you're there and you're ready to invest, I mean, you've got the basics covered. You can feel comfortable with your savings. There's no need to just stack, thousands and thousands of dollars away. You can start putting your money to work. And we'll talk through some basic ideas there. We think just starting with some really simple, no load index funds is a great way to get started with investing. You don't have to have a fancy account. You can get a free one online through a lot of the different Fidelity, Schwab, E-Trade, any of those guys. And when we talk about a no load index fund, we mean one where the expenses are really low. And you can look this up online. Just essentially means that they're not going to be taking a lot of the money out for expenses for the company that runs the fund. You're just going to be essentially investing in the entire stock market or a certain segment of it by just buying one thing. It's pretty simple. Typically, stocks go up. Some years they go down. It is volatile and you can't predict it. But over the long run, the stocks tend to go up, usually about 5 to 7% on the low side, sometimes up to 12 or 15% on the high side. So if you keep your money in the stock market long term, you end up a lot of growth. We talked about this order already of kind of what to save where. Oh, sorry, I went backwards. And the reason you want to get your money invested is the next step in the game, which is compound interest. This is kind of a magical mathematical process where you put your money into something that grows an asset, and over time it increases, and you reinvest those increases and keep them in the market or in the real estate or whatever asset you choose, and the gains compound over time. The real key to compound interest is getting it going early. You can see this kind of breakdown between investor one and two. One starts at age 25 and one starts at age 35. And just that 10-year difference of them saving the same amount each year increases their final net worth number at the end when they're ready to retire by over $170,000. And that's just the magic of compound interest. The longer your money is working for you, the better it is. So we stress, especially for our younger people in the webinar, that you get this process going as soon as you can. And it doesn't have to be a lot of money, but just starting with something and getting in the habit and flexing that muscle is really important. All right. Before we get into the next section, I'm just going to break for a second. Do we have any questions? Isabel, you got anything in the chat?
Don't have anything in the chat so far, but I was going to ask, like, looking in investments, where are places that we can invest, whether it's like property or otherwise?
Yeah, great question. So, where to invest your money? There's definitely real estate, like you mentioned, property, buying a house, and that can be your primary residence, or if you're a little higher, more advanced, you can go into investing in an investment property. There's also these things called REITs, which are essentially like an index fund, but for real estate, where you buy a share in a portfolio of properties. There's the stocks, like we talked about. There's also bonds, which are kind of the inverse of stocks. They sort of work together. When stocks tend to go up, bonds tend to be a little less aggressive or less yield there. When stocks aren't doing so great, then the bond market tends to be a little stronger. It's kind of a hedge against uncertainty. So we recommend that you kind of distribute your money across different assets. We'll talk about the bucket strategy, meaning you put your money in different buckets, and then as a whole, they all kind of work together. But yeah, there are a lot of different options. But I think when you're just getting started, start with the savings, then you can move on to basic investments like those index funds.
Great. And then we do have one more question in the
Yeah.
chat, and it is, what was the property investment called? REIT.
Yeah, it's called a REIT, REIT, Real Estate Investment Trust. Definitely, yeah, check that out. Google those. It's kind of a lower cost to entry way of buying property as opposed to just purchasing, a total home or apartment building or something like that. Right. So yeah, when do you get to the point of needing a financial advisor? This is a question we get a lot. And we say keep it simple. Until you get to a pretty complex financial place where you've got a lot of assets that you're trying to manage, you can probably do this for yourself. When you do pick a financial advisor, make sure that you're getting one that is a fiduciary. That means they work for you and they've got your best interest at heart. Um, and we typically recommend you start thinking about a financial advisor once you've got between 50 and $250,000 saved. When you're setting aside, a few $1,000s a month, then you're probably ready to start talking financial advisor. Until then, we really say just keep it simple. A savings account, a checking account, a good budget, and a basic stock account is really all you need up until then. Right. Where else can you learn some good things about the game we play? We love podcasts. At the Coward team, we make our own podcast. It's called Straight Talk. Greg Coward, our leader, does that about once a month. And he gets all kinds of different guests on. We talk about all different topics, a lot of it real estate related or mortgage related or finance related. But there's tons of great information available. Planet Money is another free one that I love from NPR. Our Straight Talk is free as well. All these are. Optimal Finance Daily. I mean, you can look on the internet and find a ton of them, but there's just tons of great information, and you can just enrich yourself by listening to a podcast, once a week in the morning. This we talked about a little bit earlier, the bucket approach to wealth building. Rather than putting all of your eggs in one basket, so to speak, moving your money between different buckets. And these are some of the most common ones and ones that we recommend. Talked a little bit about the stocks and bonds and real estate. Investing in yourself is another great one. That means it could be going to school, getting a new certification, working on your health, just planning for your future, taking the time to do a budget. All of those things are really important and they can cost money. Taking a risk in another area that you understand is another great way to increase your wealth. If you are a person who loves a certain collectible or grew up around construction or something like that, where you really understand some niche area and you know how to make money at it, there can be a good case for just putting some of your investment capital into that and investing in a friend or a small business or something like that. We don't recommend you just go all in on any one of these buckets, though. It's important to have a few, or really as many buckets as you can have. That way, if, like I said, stocks aren't doing great, your bonds kind of make up for it. Or if the real estate market is on fire, you're not missing out on those gains. Right. Next up, okay, the key bucket to wealth building, real estate. Why would you want to get a home? Well, we are in the business of helping people get homes, so that's a big part of why we want to talk to you today. The reasons are many. One that I really love is just that a home is a asset that you can touch, you can feel, you can fix it up, you can live in it. It's just a really useful thing. You have to live somewhere. You might as well live in a great investment. Stocks are great too, but you can't really like hold them, you know? You look at them on a screen and they might feel great when they're going up, but you can't come home to a stock and be like, ah, I love this stock. Another great reason houses and real estate have gone up on average 5% per year since 1942. So after World War II in America, real estate has been a awesome, consistent investment. There are very few years that it's actually gone down. And just, for reference, 5% of a $400,000 home is $20,000 a year. Uh, and that's $20,000 that you're just building in equity naturally. And another great thing about real estate, well, can be great, I like it, is that you can't just go and dip into that piggy bank. You can't go take that $20,000 out super easily. So it's there for you when you need it, but it's not so tempting to just go and grab it. Another great thing about real estate, the tax deductions you get from having a mortgage, the interest you pay on your mortgage is tax deductible, so it helps you out there. And every time you make a mortgage payment, you're paying a little bit off your principal and building your equity there as well. Right. Next up, we're going to start with kind of the dark side of finance, debt. Everyone is afraid of it, right? It's bad. No one likes debt. Well, we think there's good debt and there's bad debt. Bad debt would be higher interest debts like credit cards or a lot of consumer loans. Good debts are ones that are getting something that's super useful for you and generally lower interest rates. So that would be something like a mortgage, you have to have a house, a car loan, you got to drive a car, a student loan, improving yourself. And generally, these also all come with lower interest rates than those other, quote, bad debts. So if you've got a bunch of debts, which ones do you want to pay off first? Well, the bad ones, right? Start with the higher interest rate cards. Any credit card that's over 15%, I would focus on paying that off as quickly as you can. Other high interest rate loans, and then kind of move down the hierarchy to your lower interest rate debts. Has anyone heard of the debt snowball or debt avalanche? It's kind of a popular term.
I
If
have
not, that's
not.
okay. No worries. Yeah, so this is just kind of a concept to help you sort of conceptualize how and which debts to pay off first. The debt snowball is where you list out all the debts that you may have and list them from largest to smallest. So you look at, okay, well, I've got $200 on this credit card and I've got this student loan that's got $50,000 on it. We're going to focus on the little ones and get the steam rolling and the momentum going and build this snowball up and get in the habit of paying off debts. And then we'll work over to the larger debts later on. This is a great way to start. We like the debt avalanche as well, as we call it, which is where you do a similar thing, but you actually organize them by the interest rate rather than the amount on the debt. So if you've got a really high interest rate card, even if it's a little bit more on it than something else, let's go ahead and pay off those higher interest rate cards before we go to the lower interest rate debts. One exception in both cases is tax debts. If you do owe taxes, pay those first. The government doesn't play around, they'll get their money, and it can really hinder your ability to get other credit or buy a house later on. So definitely knock out any tax debts. Before we go into credit, which is our next kind of piece of the game, any questions on debt, snowball, avalanche, stuff like that?
Yeah, so we've got one in the chat and it says, what are your thoughts on revolving credit line? Should one use this to pay off credit debt and then pay that off? And then comment below says pay low to small or vice versa, then add money to pay from payoff to put towards that next debt.
Yeah, so I think this is kind of thinking about like a little bit of a higher level topic, which would be like a refinance. So if you've got a lot of debt and you don't have the means to immediately start paying it off, or you're only paying it off a little bit, but you have a good way of moving it from an account where it's at a higher interest rate to a lower interest rate, that can be a great kind of midterm solution. And so if you've got a revolving credit line where the interest rate is, say, 10%, and you've got a credit card where the interest rate is, say, 20%, then it might be helpful to go ahead and move that over there just to save on the interest payments. But in general, I would say putting money towards those higher interest payments is going to be your best bet, just to get rid of that money that you're laying out towards interest. Right. So, one thing that kind of plays into your debt is your credit. And I know people are more aware than ever of their credit scores, and it's complicated. How does it work? Well, it's a lot. A lot goes into it. And we generally tell people your exact score is going to change month to month, even within the month. There's three different credit bureaus. Each one of them gets reported to from anyone who you have a debt with. That could be a car loan or a credit card. And not all cards report to all three agencies. So each agency score is going to be a little bit different. Sometimes when you're checking your score, you're checking one agency or you're checking a combined score. So it can be very confusing. Why did it go up this week, not last week? We tell people don't worry about, the ones and twos. Just focus on checking your credit occasionally, maybe every 3 months, 6 months, and making sure that it's kind of trending in the right direction. If some big change happens, look into it, don't ignore it. But in general, don't sweat the small stuff when it comes to your credit score. There's sort of benchmarks for where you want it to be for different loan products in the mortgage world. But that's when it's going to affect you the most is when you're getting new credit. The terms you get are usually dictated by your credit score. In general, a score somewhere between 6 and 700 is about average. I think 660 is around the average for the United States. Above a 700 is considered good. And, you can go up from there. At a certain point, you're kind of, overkilling it with your credit. So don't be like, I have to get a perfect score. Good credit is generally good enough for most purposes. All right. And also, I've meant to mention as well, go ahead and consult with a local expert like us if you're thinking about buying a house or have concerns about your credit. We deal with this stuff all the time. We're happy to talk you through the details of it, but it's not something that everyone needs to be stressing about every day and checking on their phone. Credit cards, good or bad? We put them in that bad debt category earlier. Are they a bad thing? No, credit cards aren't necessarily bad. They just carry high interest rates, but using them for emergencies can be super helpful. If your car breaks down, if you need to, buy something unexpectedly, they can be awesome. They can also improve your credit. Carrying a high balance on your card is not good for your credit, but having a card that carries a balance that's very low or that you pay off regularly shows that you're responsible with your use of credit and can over time improve your credit. So we say generally try to keep your credit cards to about two. You don't need 10 of them. And try to pay your balances off in a timely manner. Don't carry a balance for a long time. Definitely don't miss a payment. But credit cards themselves are not bad. Just using them for a long-term loan is not a great idea. All right. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the more advanced topics you might want to get into once you've been saving and investing for a while. You're kind of ready to level up. You're looking to the future. You're planning maybe for your retirement, for your family in the future. And one thing that you definitely want to consider is life insurance. It doesn't excite people. It's not something most people even think about, and it's really not something you buy for yourself. It's something you buy for the people that you love. And it's in the worst case, if you pass away, it's protection for them. It'll help them pay bills, pay off any debts you may have, finance a kid's education, maybe help your spouse retire, things like that. There's two general types of life insurance you'd want to consider. One is term life, which is available for a certain term. That's why it's in the name. So you buy a policy that's good for the next 20 years or whatever. And after that period, you're no longer covered. These policies are generally pretty inexpensive. We're talking maybe $50 a month or less. You can't cash them in, and they only pay out, if you die. The other type is what's called a whole life policy. These are much more expensive, and they actually have a cash value and they cover you whenever you die. So if you pay into it your whole life and you die when you're 100 years old, it still pays out, and you can borrow against it. Sometimes you can even get dividends from it while you're still alive. I would say term life is what most people start with. Whole life is kind of a more advanced situation. Another thing to consider would be variable life insurance. This is kind of more complex. We don't generally recommend it. It's not for most people, but we did just want to mention that there is sort of a hybrid model as well. Uh, Planning for when you pass away or when you can't make decisions for yourself anymore is also an important part of the game of money. There will come a day when it happens to all of us, and wills and trusts are the way that you can just make sure that what you wanted to happen with your financial life is taken care of after you die. A will is a document that you write up with an attorney and file, and it dictates what happens to all of your stuff and your assets that belong to you when you die. A trust is set up while you're still alive, and it creates sort of a legal entity that holds assets and then has rules as to what happens to them. So you kind of get a little more say in how the trust is set up while you're alive, and it can be changed while you're alive. The will is just what happens when you actually die. Both of them part of the same puzzle, which is ensuring that your property gets distributed how you want. All right, this is advice for younger people. Call it advice for new adults. So, if you have trouble paying off debts that you've been incurring, such as credit cards, you should probably avoid taking on debt in general until you feel comfortable using it responsibly. It's really important when you're getting any kind of credit card or any sort of loan that you're considering the APR or annual percentage rate. That is the amount of interest that you pay on the debt. And just for example here, this is three different APRs set up with a $1,000 debt and showing you annually how much money you pay in interest for each one. So you can see 24%, and sorry, that dollar sign should be a percent sign, is $240 of interest per year on a $1,000 debt versus a 3% interest rate would be only $30 a year. So that's always, the apples to apples way of shopping for any kind of loan or credit is the APR. Other advice for young people, get into that investing early, like we talked about. That compound interest is your friend. The more you can invest at a younger age, the better. We say the best time to plant a tree is 10 years ago, but the second best time is right now. So it's never too late to start, but the earlier the better. As you're saving and getting into investing, we think saving for real estate should be a top priority. Buying a home, again, there's just tons of great benefits to it. It's a place you can stay, you can raise a family. It's just a great all-around investment. When you're thinking about the future, think about the costs of your children, all that. Like, just the sooner you can get started, the better, because as you get older, your expenses always tend to go up, whether it's kids or house or family. And your earning potential also tends to go up as well as you get older. Setting up that 401k early, again, just getting those seeds in the ground now. Even if you're only contributing, $20, $50 a month, whatever you can, it helps and it builds over time. So getting in that habit, getting into the working the muscle of doing a budget and saving is just key. Do it as soon as you can. We say choose retirement savings over college savings. A lot of people are planning for having kids or their kids that they already have going to college one day and they want to put money away for that. But like I said before, your earning potential tends to increase over the span of your life. So when you're in your 40s and 50s is when you're going to be making the most money, and probably when your kids will be in college. So if you need to help them out, you'll be in the best position to do it. Putting money into retirement savings and letting that interest compound over time is really the key to building wealth and getting ready for retirement. See. Oh yeah, I wanted to hit taxes too. You can't avoid them. We talked about the death stuff. Now we'll talk about the taxes. You are going to pay taxes pretty much no matter what. There are a few instances, some veterans and other people don't have to pay taxes, but you're going to be taxed typically at the state level and the federal level, and we mostly all pay Social Security taxes. A lot of people don't realize that there are these tax brackets. You might have heard the word before, but essentially you get taxed differently depending on how much money you're earning. And at the different levels, there are different rates. So the first $11,000 you make, you essentially are paying 10%. Then up to about 44,000 on that additional income, you're paying it at 12%. Above that, you're going up to about 22%. And then there are additional tax brackets even above that. So it kind of accumulates. This is just to say that you are going to pay more taxes the more money you make. And so using some of those tax advantaged accounts like a 401k or an IRA can really help you because you get to pay into those without paying the taxes first. Also, we talked about the mortgage interest deduction. Another great benefit of real estate is being able to lower the amount of income that you're claiming on your taxes by deducting that mortgage interest. Um, Sorry, this slide is outdated, but just wanted to mention that this is part of a series. We do every quarter, 3 different webinars. Our next one coming up next month is that budget like a boss. So if you heard some stuff you're interested in, you thinking about starting a budget or just want to change your budget, we have some awesome free resources. They're available on our website, thecowardteam.com. You can go there and get started. It is made to be super simple. We tried to make it just as basic as can be and help you get started. There's instructions there, and we would love to see you at that webinar as well. If you have any other questions right now, I'll hang out for a few minutes and take any questions. Thank you all for joining me this evening. I really appreciate your time, and let me know if you have anything else you'd like me to answer.
I also just want to mention too that our information is on our website. You can find it under our resources tab. We have like all of our webinar stuff listed out as well. Just might be interesting for anyone interested as well.
Yeah, thank you, Isabel. That's super helpful. Yeah, if you go to
Mhm.
thecowardteam.com, it's a great website. You can find the podcast I talked about there. You can find the budgeting stuff. You can find all of our other resources. And obviously, you can get in touch with us there as well if you're thinking about buying a house, want to talk about mortgage stuff or how you may qualify. If you've got questions about credit, anything like that, it's just a great website to check out. And yeah, it's easy to get in touch with us there.
A question about if I have a trust, let me
Mhm.
back up. So if I have a will and I leave a house to a family member, it's probably better to put it in a trust than put it because when they if they decide to sell a house after I die, capital gains will kill them. Is that is it better to do that?
Yeah, I would say in that case it's probably a little more complicated depending on your exact situation. If they are in your will and the house passes to them and they sell it, it's going to vary on the locality, but there are some instances where they would have to pay capital gains, but yeah, the trust essentially would file its own taxes too. So I think you'd want to kind of dig in with like a trust attorney on your exact situation and what would be best for you. And also what your goals are, for that house, for your family members and who you're trying to leave it to. But yeah, that is kind of some of the higher level stuff in
Okay,
the game
thank
of
you.
money. But yeah, it's definitely worth looking into. All
Okay,
right.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining tonight. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, I will just say thanks for coming and hope to talk to you again soon. Come to our next webinar. And thank you, Isabel, for helping facilitate tonight.
Yeah, no worries. I had a good time.
Well, good night, y'all. Take care.
Bye.
All right.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop the recording here.